and we are just waiting for other people to join in, and then we are going to start. Yeah, so you can go ahead to introduce yourself in the chat box, where you are joining from, your name, maybe your expectation for the session. We are happy to get your thoughts in the chat. This session is meant to be as interactive as possible. Yeah, I can see more people are joining in. We'll give it about 90 more seconds, for people to join, and then we'll start fully. You can also let your colleagues know that we've started. This is the Climate and Mental Health track at the African Public Health Students Summit, and we are so happy to host you. We've been discussing climate and health all through the summit, and we've not had, ample time to, highlight mental health as much as we'd like. So this session is going to be fully about mental health and psychosocial support. Yeah, so you can just share the link with your colleagues, have other people join in. We'll be starting shortly. Thank you all. Don't forget to introduce yourself in the chat box, your name, where you're calling from. Yeah, we're happy to meet you all. Okay, yeah, I think we can go ahead now. Hi again, my name is Ayomide Olude, and I am the project manager at the Eco Anxiety Africa project, which is a project that is a part of Positive Vibes Nigeria. And what we do is basically focus on climate change and mental health. And we're given the privilege to host the climate change and mental health track at the African Public Health Students Summit. And today for our program, we are having a workshop on climate-aware psychosocial support, which is going to be led by Professor Kenneth Yongabi Achang. And we are super excited to have Professor Kenneth with us in the room. He is an experienced public health expert, and phytobiotechnology expert. So I hope I pronounced that correctly. So I'm just going to, okay. Before I go ahead to read his bio, I want to encourage you to drop your comments in the chat, your name and where you're calling from exactly. Would like to meet you all in the chat. We want this session to be as interactive as possible. So if you can just do that, I would love to see your comments in the chat, your name and where you're calling from. Yeah. I don't know if anyone can hear me because I'm not seeing anything in the chat though.
Yes, I hear you 100%.
Okay, thank you. Okay,
I'm sure
Fumi
others too.
Yeah, okay. Sonia is from Lagos, Nigeria. Fumilade is from Lagos. Thank you for joining our session. We are happy to have you here. We also have Lekwa listening from Lagos. Okay. Dorothy from Nasarawa. Nice. Thank you, Dorothy, for joining in. Okay, while we'll have comments coming in the chat, I would go ahead to read Professor Kenneth's bio and then hand over to him to lead this session. So Professor Kenneth Yongabi Achang is a distinguished professor in public health and infectiology with over 150 scientific publications, more than 120 conference papers and proceedings, 3 books, plus a breadth of experience that covers workshops as well as consultancies, including the WHO, HPD, Federal Ministry of Health Nigeria, African Union Scientific Research and Innovation Council, DANIDAD, DFID, UNDP, and UNESCO. Professor Kenneth's research covers the African public health systems, where he has demonstrated through pilot projects the public health reality required for Africa and Afrocentric health literacy demonstration projects rooted in indigenous knowledge in combating climate change-related mental grief. In 2020, he received the Mark Boplet Gold Medal for distinguished research contributions in Africa from the Cameroon Academy of Sciences and an honorary recognition by the Minister of State for Health Nigeria in 2022 for significant contributions in phytomedicine in Nigeria. He is a professor at Imo State University and Claritian University of Nigeria. He is also a fellow of the Public Health Practitioners Council of Nigeria and currently coordinating a sub-Saharan regional dialogue on climate change impact on mental health in collaboration with the Imperial College London and also supported by Wellcome Trust UK. So thank you so much, sir, for joining us and taking time to share your knowledge with us in this session. So over to you, sir.
Okay, thank you, Ayo, for that introduction. I think we would more or less, on behalf of everyone here, recognize our different strengths and capacities, and also to recognize the laid down protocol that the organizers have put in place. So I really appreciate that. So, and thank you specifically, Ayo and the team, for getting me on board for this, Public Health Students Week. I really appreciate that. And I think, if I look at what I was asked to do for this workshop, and like Ayo said specifically, so it's a workshop. That means we have to be interactive, and we are in a space that everybody is learning. There's really no quote unquote call it sound expert in this, because the climate is changing. So many environmental changes are occurring, and so many issues related to our psychology, our psyche. It all says a lot that we are all learning, and that no one knows it all. And that's the more important reason why we have to be very interactive. Now, this session on climate change and health summit, this particular workshop is centered on the mental health component. How do we understand the intersection of climate and mental health? We are all students here, including myself. Shakespeare says that we keep learning until we quit the stage of earth, because ultimate knowledge comes from God. And there's so much mystery on earth. Nobody has been able to explain succinctly how revolution of the earth and rotation of the earth occurs. What is the activation energy? We know that the earth is revolving, and the earth at the same time simultaneously is also rotating. Scientists have not been able to unveil specifically how the mechanism occurs, and this is what we call it a dogma and a mystery. When the earth is rotating and revolving at the same time, there is climate variability as a result of rotation and revolution. That is natural. So there is a natural phenomenon of climate. Climate change has a natural phenomenon. So we need to take that. But when we are now referring to, at this moment, about climate change, it is a specialized term now that the climate is changing more than its normal level. That is what we mean now by climate change. So what I want to draw attention here is that naturally there is climate change because the earth is rotating and the earth is revolving. Now you must have winter, you must have summer, you must have autumn. You know, for us, we must have dry season, we must have rainy season. That is climate change. The climate has changed from rainy season to dry season. That's the normal. We are born, and that's what it's meant to be. That these seasonal variations are there, giving the beauty of climate. If we just have one particular climate, life is not going to be beautiful. Just imagine that naturally we had only summer. So you can imagine that we're perpetually in summer forever. That doesn't provide beauty. And also imagine that naturally, if we were provided only rainy season, that would not provide beauty. But nature provided rainy season and dry season. That is the definition of a climate change. The climate has changed from rainy season to dry season. But today, when the global community is talking about climate change, it's an aberration, it's an abnormality that the climate has changed more than what it's supposed to be. So we have a scenario where rainy season prolongs, that's number one, or rainy season produces too much rain within that same specific period of time, so much volume of water that is unnecessary. That is climate change. We have a scenario where we have so much, the heat level, the dry season becomes more dry than the usual dryness. And we experience more heat than the usual heat. Then we are now referring that in meteorological terms as climate change. So with that working definition, we need to have that at the back of our mind. Now, it doesn't mean that we were not having certain aberration even prior to the era of climate, the term climate change, as often referred today. There were times when we have periodic, excess of rain, but it was not constant. Listen to me very carefully because I want us to understand the conceptualization of all these terms and to set the pace for us to be able to understand why we're here. There were times when in the normal rainy season, you have some excess rain that will periodically extend and produce more water. That was normal. That was an abnormality, a brief abnormality in a normality. I hope you understand what I'm bringing here. There was a brief abnormality in normality. We grow up noticing that there was some time within a rainy season that rains would be more periodically, and you have some kind of flash flooding around that time, but it was not constant. So today, climate change means an abnormality that has generated a constancy and it keeps increasing and progressing. That is the working definition of climate change. That is it. So on that note now, I've set the temperature for us to discuss this now. This session is to give an overview of climate disasters in Africa. And I was trying to limit myself to sub-Saharan Africa. Now, the Northern Africa is within the Sahara Desert. The Sahara Desert is a dry zone. And we know that that dry zone, naturally, that is the way it is. You cannot call a natural zone climate change because that was the way nature designed it to be. But when it starts increasing and coming down to attack areas or land, geographical space that is not normal within that space, then we can now call it climate change. And that is exactly that. So I'll go to my slide now to look at the first part of it. What are the climate disasters? Having defined climate change, what is climate change? Now, let us look at how climate change affects sub-Saharan Africa and Africa. What are these disasters? Now, when this change occurs, which is an abnormality within the normal that we know, it brings about, a distortion of the entire ecosystem. And when I say ecosystem, what is ecosystem? The ecosystem is to look at the land, the air, and the water. And in the ecosystem, you have niches. What they call niches, there are different microcosms that make up their communities in an ecosystem. This is very important for us to know ecology, Now, and this is also bringing another area, what they call climate ecology. Because we're talking about climate psychology, but we have to look at climate ecology and also look at, ecology and psychology coming together to tango. Well, that's one of the nitty-gritties that we should be looking at here. Now, these abnormalities that we're talking about and are progressing has a cause. What is the cause of these abnormalities that we are experiencing? Now, there is a cause and there is an effect. So cause, effect. Now, we would also briefly delve on the causes, but then what we are now focusing on, how does this abnormality affects us? Now, there's a proportional affection. When it affects us proportionally. There are areas where the proportion would be very minimal. There are areas where the proportion would be really huge. When it is huge and it impacts heavily, we now call it a disaster. So what is a climate disaster? This is very important. So that means that the abnormality is heavily burdening on us, causing huge impact. The impact hits us physically. The impact hits us psychologically. Because when it hits us physically, we feel the psychological pain. Now, you can feel physical pain, but the pain touches on your psyche because you want to imagine that pain. And to imagine that pain is an intangible phenomenon. Intangible phenomenon in the sense that you are now thinking how this effect and impact is touching on maybe my house, my property, maybe the effect is giving me a wound on my body. You're feeling it. As you feel that pain physically, you also feel the pain mentally because there is a preoccupational thought on your mind about that pain, and that is mental. Now, when it degenerates to create emotions, because you start expressing some form of distaste, start expressing some form of dissatisfaction, start ranting, start bantering, that means it has touched your emotions. And there is a psychobiological effect to it. What is psychobiological? Because when you think about what has happened to you, your body chemistry changes. What happens? Your adrenaline secretes, you react. Now, what happened? Your psychomotor, your motor neurons, it all comes within the cerebellum. And then what happened? Now, your medulla oblongata. So all these changes are occurring on your brain. And it brings what they call neuropsychology. Neuropsychology. So you start at that level. That is the deontology of mental health. You cannot treat these issues because of what? You see with your eyes. You feel. There are cells that enables you to feel the impact. And these cells are in the body. Now, when these cells feel it, they communicate to the brain. The brain processes information to tell you how to react. That reaction is a product. What is the product? Emotions, anxiety, depression, psychosis. This is exactly the beauty of this kind of study. But when this depression, which is a normal reaction as a result of the five senses. The five senses were affected by that climate issue. What are the five senses? You can name the five senses. The five senses are what? You can see. The eye sees. You feel. Then you attempted to touch because of the reaction. You touch. Then in certain circumstances, you taste. Then in certain circumstances, you hear. So these are the five senses that make you to create for the brain to process your reaction. This is psychology, to process that reaction. And what is the process? You have neurons that are working. It's a chemical reaction at that level. So you have your psychomotor, and you have the ganglion, all these congregate to process that reaction. And the end product of the reaction is not depression. It is now, name it. It is now psychosis. Now, that is normal. But when it goes and start increasing, then you start having post-traumatic stress disorders, and you start having now a medical problem now. It becomes a disease now. It becomes pathological. So we'll write on to the slide and move on to the next slide. So that sets my background for me. And I want us to understand it because you are all medical students, public health students. And I wanted us to look at the psychobiological. No one is explaining in the climate science, the psychobiological processes that the five senses see flood. When you see flood, the flood comes in, hits your house, you've lost property, you're seeing it. You can't imagine seeing that you're losing these things. The first reaction, the brain tells you that this is what is happening. Adrenaline is secreted. You now become fright, what we call the flight hormones. And in some cases, for a pregnant woman who sees it, becomes traumatized. What happens? Sometimes have a miscarriage. For some other person who sees it and already having a pre-existential problem, what happens now? It becomes the hormone secretes and the person becomes hyper, supersonic, super reactive. And then what happens now? The physical effects start happening after that mental changes have occurred. Now, when it is just normal that reaction have occurred, it becomes a psychological issue. When that normal psychological issue progressively increases and becomes pathological, it becomes a psychiatric issue. That is the two things now. So you have a normality because of a reaction, it becomes psychological. Psychologists can come in there to be able to provide succor at that level. But when that abnormality progressively becomes pathological, it becomes psychiatric issue. Now you need a psychiatric specialist, that's a medical doctor specialized in psychiatry, to come in at that level. So there's a level for psychologists, there's a level for psychiatrists. This is very important. So I'll move to the next slide now. So the overview of these disasters in Africa. Now you can look at the map in front of you. You'll be able to see what is sub-Saharan Africa. And I want to focus on sub-Saharan Africa. Yes, I know that there are other countries present here from the Maghreb and Northern Africa. We know the Sahara area. But the Sahara area as well is also changing because of climate. So whereby the dryness, the heat waves are increasing even in the Sahara area. And it comes in with monumental effects. It comes in, the monumental effects are physical and are also social and are also psychological. This is very important. And we have different reaction when it comes physical. We have different reaction when it comes social. We have different reaction when it comes psychological. And then we have different reaction when the psychological transcends into psychiatry. This is very important. What are these disasters? I was meant to give some ground rules about our session. Feel free to break the rules. The ground rules for my session, we just have to be very respectful. I know we have also to be time conscious, but we have to listen with an open mind. One of the things we have is that we don't listen with an open mind. And we need to know that this is an interdisciplinary subject. And I'm sorry, even in Europe, they haven't understood the psychobiologicals. Even the West haven't understood it very well. That's what I want to let you know. I've attended a lot of meetings. And they're not talking about all these neurological, how the mechanisms and things like this occur, how the five senses come to tango. They're not talking about it. We have a paper on this, and we looked at, psychologists don't even understand that the ecosystem, you know, how you can see a lizard that is becoming extinct and certain frogs and certain toads becoming extinct, and it begins to make you worry. How many times? Most of you don't even get worried if a toad is, the population of toads, you know, or toads are having delayed metamorphosis. It doesn't bother you. But for a zoologist, it begins to bother that zoologist, especially a conservationist. This is exactly climate change and mental health. So I'll move on to the next slide now. Sorry. I don't know what's happening. Beautiful. So I picked this from our dialogues last year when we had the Connecting Climate Minds project, which I'm the chair for Sub-Saharan Africa. We displayed this. It remains the same. If you look at droughts and wildfires, when it comes to dry season in Africa, you start having wildfires appearing. But wildfires has not been a major issue. It's been reported more in Australia and parts of Canada and parts of the United States because of those areas. But you can see the states where these things occur. It doesn't occur because in more tropical, a kind of tropical areas, even in the temperate areas, you can see that. But then it doesn't mean that there were no wildfires. They were there. But what is the prevalence and the persistence of this wildfire? What is the gravity? We can now begin to relate that to climate change. Again, I've set what they call the working definition of climate change for you, because everybody's shouting climate change, you know, all over the place. But you can tell, and I want to challenge you students, that a lot of them shouting climate change and climate justice, they're all looking for money too. I think that's what I come to realize. But they're not coming back to understand the nitty-gritties. That's what I want to be able to direct you here. So, wildfires. But we have wildfires here more in the dry season where you just find the mountain, you know, grassland areas start burning. You don't know where the cause of the fire and things like that. So if you look at the map there, look at Nigeria. Drought. Nigeria has a sizable 20 million, you know, affected with drought. Look at Nigeria. And it's increasing. Now look at, after Nigeria, look at those countries up. I think that's moving towards Niger. You can see the drought there. So Nigeria is at the risk of drought. That's it from these figures. And this, the source is there. I've quoted the source. The source is EM data that you can actually verify. And if you also verify from meteorological data from Nigeria, NIMET, you would also agree with me. And that the drought from areas like Sokoto, Zamfara, and all these areas. So you can see that. And then you can also come down to areas of Sudan. You can also see that there is drought. And the drought, could we say that this drought can be maintained at this level? But there's a prediction that the data we have here is from 1991 to 2022. So what if we now say from 2022 to 2050, would that still be the same? These are questions we need to ask ourselves. And of course, that drought that we have, what is the effect of that drought? What is the impact of that drought? We know that there are areas that are naturally drought zones, but when the drought increases, brings in that impact, we now have a physical problem, we now have a social problem, and more importantly, the mental challenges that we have. Now, floods, it's a major problem across Africa now. If you look at the flood areas, so if you compare the two slides I've shown you now, you realize that drought is a major problem. But flood comes in periodically within the rainy season. And now in Nigeria, for instance, floods are hitting hard in the northern parts, Zamfara State, Sokoto, Jigawa, Kano, Bauchi. I mean, you've been seeing on TV or news media outings telling us that 400 houses, for instance, these 400 houses were submerged in Jigawa State. And, you know, I think about 20 or more lives were lost. And we call that, I like to use a word which is a hybrid word. So you can imagine the eco-mortality. That's what I'm trying to bring out here. I'm bringing a hybrid word. You could also imagine the eco-mobility. Those houses that were displaced, people who are displaced in these 400 houses, meant to live in another environment. And there is a big burden and huge burden. It has distorted their social fabric. It has distorted their psychological fabric. And for those who were already patients with one health crisis or the other, the health crisis becomes compounded, and we can call that. And that compoundment is as a result of the ecological disaster, and we can actually have the right here to say it's eco-morbidity. I mean, if you permit me that way, who says we shouldn't? So that's it. Now, I've been working for these countries across sub-Saharan Africa, and this is one community here, which is close to us here. This is Anambra State, Nigeria. And you can see, and at the moment now in Anambra State, in this Anam community, is one of my case study communities. At the moment right now, there's no flood. There are signs of floods, but their floods will come in within September, mid-September, towards end of September, October. That's when this community becomes flooded. So you can look at the cycle. But at the moment, interestingly, flooding is occurring more in northern Nigerian states. And that's something we're gonna like start unraveling. Why? How? So we're looking at what's happening in this sense. So this is another community. You can imagine how these people here feel. But then let's try to empathize in a way. Put yourself in this situation. How do you feel? Wouldn't you be emotional? Wouldn't you be worried? You cannot go about your normal activities. That's the situation. This is another case study community I worked with. And this is in Bayelsa State in Nigeria. And we had what we call a life experience group member. That's her is there. That's Josephine working with us in our group. And she was visiting households in Yenagua, in Bayelsa State, affected by floods. So we did a characterization of the impact, physical, social, psychological, and psychiatrical as well. And was very interesting. This woman lost her complete poultry farm. There's a few birds there that are looking alive. Most, 3/4 of the birds in her poultry farm died due to flooding. And we noticed that the incidence of Gumboro disease and Newcastle disease among the chickens became very high, as you can see from there. Now, look at the woman there. Look at her door. Water. She barely comes out of her house. And now there is a proliferation. If you look at the green scum there, proliferation of moss. That is a bryophyte called moss coming out there, making the place look ugly. And then it became an entrap for mosquitoes. And she's very worried. So she became emotional when she was expressing to the interviewer that this is what she's going through. And she has a sense of grief that she's lost her source of income. From the vicinity, again, you discover that we notice through laboratory studies, because we live experience, pick some samples, and as I bring some samples, I need to get the water samples and soil. And we notice contamination of ascaris, E. coli, salmonella from the soil around there. And we did a study to find out this same house, when there's no flooding, do we still have these organisms? And realize that, yes, the organisms are not in the same population, but since it has been a perennial flooding community, so there is total contamination of the soil and water in that area. So we could simulate that there is a potential for zoonotic diseases, or disease spread by animals and humans. And what clearly we found is that these farmers We just showed you one as an example, but there are many suffer from equal anxiety and depression. Depression became more after being anxious, because they were anxious, and then continuous anxiety when that scenario, when they picture that scenario, when they are helpless in the face of that scenario, makes them run into depression. That's it. And more importantly, some of them disclose to us, to our team members, that the farmlands where they were cultivating crops became submerged, just water up there, making it the soil infertile, because with the water persistently being there, prevents oxygen to, aerate nitrogen-fixing bacteria to improve, the soil fertility, and thereby rendering the soil infertile. So basically, what we're seeing now, between July and August, we have more than 400 houses have submerged in Nigeria, like I've mentioned. 12 local governments are affected, 20 deaths due to flooding. So you can imagine, if you go to the siblings and the family folks of those that have lost ones, is there no grief? Obviously, they are grieving the loss of their family members. The community is also in grief. There's individual grief, but there's also a community grief. It has distorted the social fabric of people in Jigawa State. In Bauchi local government, the road linking Bauchi and Maiduguri was totally cut off, and passengers were all stranded both ways. 2 people were reported dead. In Yobe State, many houses displaced, many people displaced, many houses submerged. In Kano and Zamfara, the same. And of course, in Kampala, we heard what happened in Uganda, where there was a landslide that killed more than 35 people, and all linked to environmental. What we can see is that Cameroon, Kenya, Uganda, Malawi, South Africa have different floods affected by climate in different volumes and intensity. And if you take a systematic study of how people feel, there is a national feeling of depression as well, but there's also community and individual feeling of depression and anxiety. I like to repeat this again. There is individual and community emotional feelings, but there's also a national emotions, country-based emotion as well. We cannot forget that when the different countries come on the news. Now, one of the things to observe is that with this climate psychology and climate issues, drinking water becomes contaminated. And that's what we hear of cholera. There was just recently in the last 2 months, cholera outbreak, in Nigeria. And that became that epidemic of cholera. And we heard cases of cholera outbreak in DRC Congo, and which is the hot spot now of this current monkeypox, where we know more than 450 people have died just in DRC Congo from monkeypox, which is a hot spot. There is war, there's migration, there's climate change, compounding the health picture of this area. Now, in Angola, we notice climate change already affecting water body, which already water is in premium. And of course, and this is affecting water, both contaminating the water, making potable water unavailable. And you can see the commotion. Look at the picture there. You can begin to feel the commotion, the anxiety that I need to get water. These young folks are anxiously looking for water. That is psychological. Projected change in the number of hot days. There is a projection of that by 2030, which is relative to 1986 to 2005, that there will be extreme heat across Africa. How true is this? But this is a simulated projection based on the current scenario. And that is very key for us. These kinds of projections warn us. And it also gives us a psychological preparedness How psychologically are we prepared to encounter this, even if we're not alive? But our children, we need to make a future, to prepare a psychological future for them. Now, I'm still talking about disasters, eco disasters across Africa and how they affect mental. Look at that. This is, prolonged rains, lightning strike a whole herd of cattle. You can see the grief. Look how saddened are those people watching this scenario. Just please, my audience, could you just picture yourself in where this cattle, look at the herdsmen over there, watching in grief and in dismay. What has happened? What's going on? Definitely, that the eyes have seen and have processed emotion, processed information, which the result is what? Emotion and contemplation. Look at what is happening. Look at the one folding her arms. That is a reflex action to express emotion. On your right, or my right, which is definitely your left, you can see that corn farm, the maize farm, submerged by flood. So you can see the effect translates into anxiety. It translates into worry. That is the product. So worry comes, emotion comes, or psychosis, it comes as a result of a physical expression, a physical distortion, a physical malapropism. And that's exactly what we are seeing there. It doesn't just come. You cannot reflect. Sometimes you cannot be worried about what you don't have some evidence about. Sometimes there are issues, except issues of divinity, where you can get worried about death, or you get worried about issues of eternal space. But you imagine that in all, that's it. And back to this slide again, I like to say that we need an equal co-understanding. And look at the bottom of my slide. We need an equal co-understanding. We need an equal co-creation. We need an equal co-evolution. We need an equal co-development. We need an equal co-delivery. That's the way we can conceive this space and improve public health space in Africa. And I challenge the public health experts of Africa that that's the only way we can go to make impact. There is a selfish public health. The selfish public health we have is that I want to portray myself as an expert in public health. That's rubbish. But we need to change that perception, to come in a community, to really make impact for all of us, for co-benefits of everyone in that community. That's the way public health can make sense to us. And that's the only way we need to start thinking in that dimension. The public health now we have now in Africa, particularly, is counterproductive because so much volume of knowledge for individualism and not communism, community engagement, where we actually actualize it. That's why I made that point there. It's a take-home message too. Okay, so we move to the next slide now. Okay, so you can see links to all what I'm talking about. We've captured them on these links, and we're going to share the links so you can look at how climate and mental health issues in Africa. So I will pause here for reflection. The questions I want to ask here would be, I'll take it down. What are the prevalent climate disasters in Sub-Saharan Africa? That I've just given you a snippet, but there are a lot. We're trying to keep pace and track of what happens around the 49 countries of Sub-Saharan Africa. So it's not an easy thing. But what are the prevalent climate disasters in Sub-Saharan Africa? Perhaps that you know. How does it affect the water, the area, and soil biosphere? What is soil? What is area biosphere? How does it affect the air? How does it affect soil? The air already has its natural, let's call it natural smell and natural morphology. Now, with climate change, how does it affect that air? maybe you have a waste dump, a refuse dump somewhere, and with excess flooding, it starts some form of fermentation and you start having air pollution and it changes the smell, the usual smell, the nice smell of that particular environment. So I call it area biosphere. And then, of course, how does it affect the soil texture? When you see this effect process an information to you, and that information generates a product. That product is your reaction, and that is the psychological issue I'm talking about. How does it affect animals? You've seen a picture there where animals, I just give you that, but I didn't even give you the pictures of how domestic animals were jumping on trees when there was a flood, giving us a picture of what happened during the Noah's Ark. How flooding came. It was like an Armageddon rag. It was like an apocalypse. How does it affect microbia? We just did a study to see that the microbial flora, the indigens of that soil, have also been displaced. Just imagine. They are talking about displacement in Zamfara, 400 houses, but no one is talking about microbes too have been displaced in the soil. They're also complaining. The microbes have psychological issues. The animals are also psychologically traumatized. The plants are crying, but you are not listening because we are only communicating. We communicate to ourselves. But who can listen to the plea of the plant's diversity? Who can listen to microbial diversity crying there? They're also psychologically traumatized. Who knows whether some of them have psychiatric problems? But no one is communicating. We were concerned. How does it affect our mental well-being? All right, can someone explain this to us? Can someone explain the mechanism? Do plants and animals feel the stress of extreme weather? The answer is yes. So I'll pause here for now. And when we come back, we have the last few minutes. Again, while to entertain questions are the part of my slides will not tell you interventions. Is there any question here before we go to interventions? Ayo, this is a pause. It's a pause here. So it's a reflection. I just discussed. I want us to discuss. This is just a reflection. Public health students, we have a lot to do. So this is a reflection. All right. Yeah. And I want us to take it in a different dimension because no one is talking about these dimensions that we're talking about. Where everybody is shouting climate, 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 climate. Please, there are also those that are psychologically disturbed in the climate shouting. All right. So I want us to take note about that. All right. Over. Ayo, over to you. Take a few questions before we go to the interventions. We'll run through the slide. Then we now have questions now, more. All right. Thank you.
Okay, Aya, before you go on, I want to just read. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, I want to just read someone's comment. I think it was for, okay, Daniel Bassis. Okay, his hand is raised. I guess he can ask that altogether. So you can go on.
All right. Thank you. Good morning, and thank you for this presentation. I actually asked in the comment section. I was just trying to buttress what you said when you were trying to draw the line between climate change and climate disaster. So the change is that prolonged atmospheric change, atmospheric condition over a period of time, a prolonged period of time within a specific area. Now, when it becomes a disaster, it's when it begins to affect us mentally, physically, and psychologically. I want to know if that's correct. That's one. Then secondly, on the drought map, I noticed, like you also pointed out, Nigeria seemed to be like a hotspot for drought compared to other countries within the same region, the same equatorial region, the same sub-Saharan region. And also when it comes to the flood map as well, I mean, the map, the Nigeria seems to be a bit, not even a bit, like, yeah, it's like a hotspot again. Now, drought and flood. I'm looking at them, I don't know, from my own view, they're looking at two sides of a coin, drought and flood. But Nigeria as a country seems to be up relatively when it comes to droughts, when it comes to flood? Is there a way we can tie this? And also, can it be related to I don't know if this is okay, can it be reconciled geographically, as in Nigeria's geographic position compared to nearby countries?
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, sir.
If everyone can hear me, just say yes. So just let's have a thunderous yes, so you know you can hear me. Everyone hearing me?
Yes,
Yes.
yes, we can hear you, sir.
Okay, very, very
I
good.
hear you.
The definition succinctly captured. Yes, that is the definition of climate change. You know, and that you must say there is that persistence, because there's climate variability. There's climate variation that you must have this season. That is normal. That's the way it was created ab initio. A change is mathematical. A change is proportional. What we are not saying change, it's a proportional term. So this is a working definition of a phenomenon that is happening, and we call it climate change. But in a way, if you don't make that distinction, people wouldn't really know that there was, even without the era of climate change, many centuries ago, the word climate change was in existence. Because we had rainy season, dry season. Even biblically, they will tell you there's a time for rain, a time for this, a time for that. True or false? True. So change in this perspective is a proportionality. That the rate of that change has been aberrated. That is what we call today climate change. So I want this definition, I want us to clarify this very clearly, because even biblically, even in many holy books, they told you there's a time for everything. There's a time to live, there's a time to die. That's a change. And let me throw it back to you. If there's a time to live and time to die, if we overlive, is that not an aberration of change? If we overdie, if we die before our time, and things like that, that is what we mean by change. So you've captured that definition correctly. Now back to your Nigeria here. True, Nigeria seems to be a hotspot, and it's clearly predicted there. But then it's again what we will want to, in my perspective, call it Africa in miniature. That is it seems to reflect what you will easily get across entire country of Africa, the entire subcontinent of sub-Saharan Africa, and of course Africa, because all the climatic zones and geographical expressions are found in Nigeria. That's number one. Is it Sahel? Is it tropical? Whatever. You find all this in different small proportions. They are all found in Nigeria. Now, when you also look at the population of Nigeria, this is more than 200 million people. There's the most populated country in Africa. It's every reason for us to conclude in every sense of the word that there is also the environmental factor that has come in to start to produce the kind of results we're seeing, the kind of observation that we're seeing. So yes, for flooding, yes, you see what is happening. If you look at the flood pictures across Africa, Nigeria has highest floods at the moment now. Just look at what has happened in the northern states. And when it start moving towards September and October, the southern states will start experiencing flooding. Look at the geographical dichotomy and what is happening. So many explanations can actually go into that. So yes, so the environmental factor is there. This the fact that you have more than 200 million people. You can imagine the rate of production of carbon dioxide by 200 million people and compare to the rate of production of oxygen that the 200 million people are using the oxygen. Where do we get oxygen? Oxygen is synthesized by what? It's a photosynthetic process. Plants are producing oxygen as well, and we need these plants. Now, if we just imagine you lock yourself up in room and putting 200 people in that small space of a room with all windows shut, you're producing carbon dioxide. Would you suffocate? You have to asphyxiate, right? So these are the kinds of things we're looking at. So we could come up with different explanations to what is happening, or perhaps it's a synchronized explanation of what is happening. Thank you.
Yeah, I think somebody else. Okay, yeah, Lekwa, you can go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Kenneth. I wanted to ask a question or just provide more clarity on, you talk about climate psychology and climate psychiatry. I wanted to just go over that again and so you can understand what you meant by that.
Yes, thank you, Lekwa, for your question. Psychology is basically with your psyche, definitely. Psychiatry is also with your psyche. It's about mind and body, mind and body. And then also, later on, mind, body, and spirit. In divinity, mind, body, spirit, and soul. Now we're going to a space that we cannot explain. We call that, dogmatic psychology or dogmatic psychiatry. Dogma, we cannot explain. Mystery, we cannot explain. It's beyond our senses. We'll keep it for the eternal. Now, psychology, what I was meaning there is that when you see it is something that has happened that is impacting, you develop feelings. The feelings come through your 5 senses. I see, I feel, I smell. Now, once that happens, what happens? The body captures the information, and that information is being processed in your brain, in the central nervous system. You have your medulla oblongata, you have your cerebellum, you have the cerebellum and cerebrum. These are now what happens now? It processes information. The neurons carry this information, they start processing, and that information makes you react. Let me give you an example. Lekwa, you see, let's say you see a python, and then you also see a rose flower. Can you imagine? Now, just imagine what goes through your mind. This information being processed. And Lekwa, you see a very beautiful lady. Just watch what happens in Nigeria today. I watch the universities. People are driving and they see a beautiful girl. They leave the steering and start watching. So what happens? A certain information is being processed in their mind. Oh, I wish I could have this. Okay, that's a psyche. That gives what? Some positive emotions. That I'm happy. I like what I see. Have you heard? I watch on social media, you hear some expression. Do you like what you see? Do you like what you see? I hear some expression like that. And people are like, that's happiness. So how do you process that happiness? All that now, that's psychological. That's psychological. Now, if you have bad emotions, because there's positive emotions. Oh, I'm emotionally satisfied. You've passed all your grades, A grades. You say, oh my goodness. This is so lovely. That's not emotional. But the emotions is positive. But unfortunately, the definition of emotions these days has been negative. It's been connoted to be negative, which is wrong. Emotions are positive. I'm happy. That's positive emotions. So if you have emotions that are negative, and then you need someone to guide you and counsel you out of that, that is psychological. Now, if these negative emotions persist to an uncontrollable level in you, and then it starts affecting your physical and form of life, your way of life, then it's a medical problem. It's pathological, and that is called psychiatry. You need a psychiatrist to work you out, not a psychologist in that sense now, because now it is a pathological problem. Your cells are becoming metamorphosed. Your cells are becoming affected physically because of a persistence, a growing negativity. A growing negativity. to a proportion that is becoming uncontrollable. That is now a proportion that is becoming what? Immune deficiency, becoming a syndrome, what we call acquired immune deficiency syndrome, like in AIDS. You now have acquired immune deficiency emotions, then you need a psychiatrist. That is the difference between psychology and psychiatry. Okay, I'll leave it at that level. But we can so much debates, so much information about that. And this is where psychologists need to, because I talk with many psychologists and I think they have to go back. They've been reading it too social, too much on the sphere, but without looking into the deep pathological consequences. And that's why psychiatrists are mostly medical doctors who have read anatomy and physiology. Now they understand clinical diagnosis. They move towards now and take a specialty in psychiatry, clinical psychiatry now. But now psychologists can't handle this because you need to have anatomy, you need to know physiology, and in other words, you know this big psychologists can handle now these more or less, I call it them symptomatic, but not syndromes in that sense. So the symptomatics and the syndromes. So thank you. Is there any question before we move forward for interventions? So you have some questions to take home. Maybe at the end, when I finish the interventions, if you want to ask. So what are the prevailing climate disasters in sub-Saharan Africa? How does this affect water, aerial, the air, and the soil? Because that's where our emotions come from. In Africa and in the world, mental issues come in indirectly. There's no way the mental issues can just come in very directly. It has to be attached to something for you to process the information and produce a product. That product, which is your reaction, is called a mental. Get this very clearly. If it's affecting water, like the Anam community we're talking about, flooding occurs, contaminated water, they didn't have water to drink. Their worry was, now, where do I go? First house was lost. So where do I go? What do I do now? Where do I get water? But mental health issues don't come directly. You cannot just get up when you're in, you have everything. Everything is fine. Everything is moving. Then you start saying that I'm mental. I'm going mental. Doesn't make sense. There's no way you can just say I'm going mental. But you can be positively mental, positively emotions. I'm so happy. So could you picture 1 minute? Just picture yourself in heaven. That you're in heaven. Just picture yourself. They call it eternal bliss. There's emotions in heaven. Eternal happiness. It's positive emotions. You're emotional. There's even anxiety in heaven because of excess joy. Excess joy. It's anxiety. But let's not portray it as if when we talk about anxiety, we're not talking about anxiety as if it's a problem. No, it's wonderful anxiety. Or you hear, I think Ayo will tell you, when you're waiting for one big parcel to come, you're aware of it, you just say, oh, I can't wait. I'm so super excited, I can't wait. That is positive anxiety. We all have it. So we have to draw a clear line today about negative anxiety, which is what we're talking about. So don't use the word anxious as if it's a negative connotation. No, I want us to have a balanced view. So I can't wait. I'm so excited. My wedding is coming up. Everything works for good. Anxiety, that's how emotions are there. But that's wonderful emotions. So think about that. How does that affect our well-being? There are these emotions that make you so happy. I'm super happy. You start feeling, somebody won a lottery, 40 million, sleeps on the bed and says, oh, I don't know what else I can do. I'm super, super happy. And that's the truth about it. And I made a rough interview with some communities. And I said, if the government wakes up today in the flood community and say, I'm not going to, you stay in the flood, I'll give you 1 billion for every person in that flood area. They'll be happy. They'll be struggling to walk in the flood and build houses inside that flood. Say, We need more floods so that we can have 1 billion. You'll be very happy. Give money now to some people. They will tell you that I don't need malaria treatment. I forgot about that malaria. I have 1 billion in my account. Just imagine that. You are sick. I have somebody who was sick to deathbed and he's saying he's still happy, checking alerts on his phone, struggling to check alerts on his phone. So I'm happy. So I'm happy. So he still has positive emotions. So I want us to think about that very, very well. Now, so I'm trying to give you how these things happen. Yeah, and then one thing with this is that even the whole entire ecosystem also has emotions. The earth has emotion. I remember as a Catholic, where you listen to the prayer of St. Francis of Assisi, he calls sun, brother sun. He calls water, sister water. He calls earth, mother earth. You know, that's the kind of thing. And that's one of the documents that Pope Francis, the Catholic, and I like to quote that, published a document called Laudato Si, the care of the environment. It's a spiritual assignment as well. And we need to take care of that. So when you are doing that spirituality, there's a positivity. There's a positivism. So that takes you now to my next slide now. So take note of the questions. So what can we do together to respond to this? Again, this is a discussion. What are we hearing? You've heard what I've said. What are we hearing from Africa? You've heard it all. You know. How can we come together to respond? That's why we're here. We're coming together. We'll keep understanding as much as we keep understanding. And let me tell this, we will always be trying to understand even as much as we have understood. Get my quotation. We will always try to be understanding. We will always have a reason to understand, even when we think we have understood. That's it. So these are the climate impacts. Loss of habitat, loss of homes, high temperatures, loss of livelihoods, disruption of systems, healthcare systems, and all that. We have heard all this. Now, how does it affect our mental health? Through the physical, it becomes a risk multiplier. It becomes also an opportunity. It has given us an opportunity to come together.
Am I like very
to talk
serious?
about it. So climate change and mental health are deeply interconnected, and it is when they say a risk multiplier. Risks are there already in the climate, but climate change has come in to multiply that risk, increase and what? Expedite that risk, amplify the risk. But it's also an opportunity for us. What is the opportunity? That for us to come together to try to understand the epistemology of climate issues and health. What kind of epistemological framework do we have about this? It cannot be understood by climate science. Who is a climate scientist? When we're growing up in school, when we're growing up and we're in elementary school, we're doing geography. And, you know, in geography, that's the subject that treated climate. But today, you have physicists who are doing atmospheric physics. You have environmental scientists who are microbiologists and all that. So it's a multidisciplinary thing. What kind of multidisciplinary approach do we need to use to understand climate? Because typically it's a systemic issue that affects the ecosystem. What is the ecosystem? Do you do ecology in secondary school? We have to look at the biological systems. And then when you have to understand that even toads are complaining, even lizards are complaining about climate change, even some plants, where you have about drought, you know, plants that are stressed due to drought. You start seeing them producing certain phytochemicals, which they are not supposed to produce, but they are producing that to cope. You start seeing fish undergoing hibernation, or certain animals undergoing hibernation just as a coping mechanism. So that's what I mean by here. Now, so there's an opportunity. This opportunity is that, like what we're doing here as students, and we need more workshops in this kind of thing, Ayo and team, because we need to be able to come to this space to demonstrate. What I'm giving you is a microcosm, it's a snippet, but there are deep demonstrable works that you can see these elements I'm talking about, which may sound theoretical, but we have, demonstrations that you can see, because what we're talking about climate is not a talk shop. We need to practice as community. And when we talk about community is very relevant in ecology. Now, the question is, how do we catalyze mental health resilience in response to this climate disaster? I've talked about the climate disasters, which again is a summary. How do we now cushion the effect? This resilience, Africans are very resilient, generally. We cope with different, take for example, in Nigeria, you live in communities where you hardly get clean water. You have to buy water. That's enough to create emotions in you. That's enough to create anxiety. You live in a community where you don't have lights. Light is becoming a premium commodity in Nigeria. So you have mental issues. You have to attend something that requires you to use power, and you don't have power. It makes you worry. Then those are already existential worries that you have. They have existential worries. Then you have pre-existential worries that are not of your making, but then you have to cope with it. And then you now have a risk multiplier like climate change that comes into to add all into that. So these are the issues. So we are here again to share. And that's why public health students are coming together. We're also here again to connect with each other, to know each other. By knowing each other in the midst of a problem, even when there's no solution, it cushions your emotions. True or false? By knowing each other, coming together to learn about the problem, even when we are undergoing that problem, it still helps us to create resilience. It makes us happy. Even, have you found happiness? You've lost someone and everybody is crying and all of you come together to cry together. There's some joy in that cry. There's some joy in the tears. There's some happiness in that tears because of what? Togetherness. What do we want to achieve here? We need to be able to create a shared vision for research. That's what we want to achieve. A shared vision for research that is solution-oriented, a problem-based learning research that can come in with solutions. And we'll go through that. So I've already highlighted all this. And this is what we did in dialogue. And one of the things that we have come across in our surveys and work so far in the last 3 years is that eco-anxiety is real. Eco-depression is real. There's also some spotted cases of bipolar disorders. There's also eco-mortality. This is a word that is not being used, but we are forcing it. We have a paper which has been coming up this, I think, September, published by Elsevier, and we brought in the term eco-mortality. We'll try to explain that it is the marriage of climate scientists and epidemiologists come together to create a word like this. And we now show the distinction why we're saying that this mortality is not just attuned or pertains to other pathological health problems, but it comes as a result of eco-mortality, where you have, for example, lightning strikes and all that stuff. You have dysmania and then solastalgia and all that stuff. We have also increased abuse of drug and substances, frustration. We've noticed that. We also have social phobia, psychosis, emotions, and stress. So these are some of the things that we are noticing. And also the fact that it doesn't spare the young, it doesn't spare the old people as well. And that's something we are very worried of. Then psychological analysis and psychosocial palliative that is being provided today in Nigeria, NEMA is doing that. But then NEMA needs to understand that this is, how do I call it? It's supposed to be a sustainable approach, but from what they are doing now, it's not a sustainable approach because it's a very mechanical approach where I come and give you gifts that the gifts are definitely perishable because they're going to finish and then you perpetually need those gifts. So it doesn't work. We are also seeing increased disease burden. And I like to say this very clearly that the mental health is becoming an epidemic. We're not calling the word epidemic, but it's an epidemic right now in different proportion, because if you look at the fact that we all live with mental health challenges in one way or the other, but also don't forget that there are also positive mental health challenges as well. So we need multidisciplinary groups to be able to study and undertake this. Now, you can refer to our work Part of it is published in the Global Research and Action Agenda for Sub-Saharan Africa, which has actually detailed and profiled these disasters, these problems. But then in the Global Research and Action Agenda, it tells us what we need to do to begin to cushion this effect in a proportion that affects a significant population of our people. It doesn't provide the solution, but it provides how we can arrive at the solution. That's what the Research and Action Agenda has provided. It doesn't provide the solutions, but it has provided the roadmap towards getting that solution. Maybe if we journey together on this roadmap, we may arrive at the solution, we may not. So this is very important. So next, so if you go to the sites, you will be able to see this website with detailed projects. All the projects for our case studies are all captured here in the Research and Action Agenda. Now, this is me now. The Research and Action Agenda is there. It's a document, black and white, written. But we need to follow it to arrive at a solution. But we've started implementing it now. We've started a water conservation project here in Southeast Nigeria, where we are training people how to conserve water, because flood comes in, water is contaminated. We barely have water to drink. And we can't keep pace of the kind of clean water like this. The cost of this water in Nigeria has increased. It has increased. Not everybody in Nigeria can keep pace on buying this water. Just imagine a household of 9 or 10, and you have to be buying this water. Can you keep the pace? Can you keep the pace? And even the pure water, the so-called pure water, the sachet water in Nigeria, we did a study just to realize that it's not pure as it's been expressed, because water guard is being used, a kind of chlorine-based compound being used to treat the water. We did a test and realized that water guard is even increasing the microbial growth from what we just recently observed. This is very worrisome, but you wouldn't want to throw it out or spill it out in the public, because it looks like you're trying to run down a company. But people have to survive. So we're doing a water conservation, and we've done these maps, these posters, and we're taking it to schools to train them on how to conserve water. And we're doing that in flood areas. So this is what we call integrated inclusive water strategies in climate services, in building flood mental health resilience in Nigeria. So we're doing that to a school that has suffered perennial floods. And these are the students, so we're training them. So 2 schools affected by floods, trained on climate and mental health. And then we're also providing these tips to cushion the effect of the stressors. We said climate change is a risk multiplier. So can we cushion that risk multiplying effect by using this approach of water conservation? Yes, that's what we're doing. Now, yesterday we had a training for one of the communities that is affected perennially by climate change, which is purely specifically just floods. And they've been having that constantly, and water is a major problem. So when we ask them during a dialogue, what is your major risk multiplier now for this flood community? Now, they said, well, when the flood comes, we are all shifted to a temporary accommodation where we all stay in temporary community. We stay there, but their major challenge is what? Water. When we go back to our communities, water is all contaminated. We don't have clean water, and we cannot buy. We don't have money to buy the so-called bottled water. So we are not training them how to purify water. And this our water purification that we're talking about here is a climate one. It doesn't use chlorine. How can you be talking about, and how can you be talking about purifying water? We're talking about climate change affecting mental health, affecting the entire fabric of our society. And then we're treating water using reverse osmosis, which is using heat, and heat actually increases global warming. And we're talking about expected increase in heat waves. Can you imagine? And then we're using chlorine and aluminum sulfate to treat water, which are chemicals that disrupt the ecosystem as well. And we start reducing them. So we have provided a climate resilient technology. This is a Moringa sun filter. Moringa sun filter doesn't use chlorine, it doesn't use water. And now we're trying to bring in a solar pump, so that way we tap solar energy to pump the water and give it for a community. So we started training the communities on this technology. So this is what our own attempt to bring in that integrative approach to cushion the effect of this mental health of these people, but addressing the triggers, the climate trigger and the climate stressor. That's what we did a training yesterday also for Anam community. You can see the treated water there. That's my technology. That's what we are doing, and so on and so forth. And now We have promised these communities that we are going to bring in how to train them on producing their fertilizer, because the communities, flood communities that we interviewed, complain that soil fertility gone once there's a flood. Farmland submerged, crop production, major problem. Soil fertility is a problem. Would they then have to now start supplying nitrogen and phosphorus fertilizer, urea? These are agrochemicals. Can we try to reduce them? We're talking about climate change. And what are the climate change indicators? Chemicals that we're using that actually kill, natural habitats, cause eutrophication. We have to look at it from a multi-dimensional approach. Climate is not a one-shot. So, or the cost of climate change is not a one-shot. So we have this technology now of training them using plastic digesters. We're implementing that in one small community in Cameroon. And that plastic digester means that for the woman that I just showed in the few slides above, whereby she has lost chicken, ask me a question and you ask yourself, how is she going to dispose that chicken? She went and dumped it somewhere. There's no disinfection of it. That's the problem. That's the problem. But now with the chicken waste that they're using as manure, which is carrying pathogens, and it's not giving a good yield. But what we've done is to train them to put in small plastic digesters, and then you can get fertilizer. Look at in front of you, you see the mineralized fertilizer in front of you. No smell, and it doesn't contain pathogens. And that's when you evaporate it, you start having fertilizer pellet, which is organic, and to grow your crops. That's one of the things. And I believe yesterday we had a training. You can see, this was yesterday. So the flood communities, we've listened to their problems. They have psychological problems. Many or all, 99.9% of them have psychological problems in one way or the other, either depression or grief or emotions. Everybody has emotions there. Not everybody has a psychiatric problem. 2 people lost their lives from that community. So yes, so 1 or 2 have some psychiatric problems now. And then even those that were already having psychiatric problems, the whole thing became multiplied. Now, we listen to them. What does NEMA do? And many non-governmental organizations, they come in and supply palliatives. Doesn't work. The problem remains perennially. So we listen to them through our dialogues, thanks to Connecting Climate Minds, supported by Wellcome Trust, and also led by Imperial College London. But now what we're doing, which the other global communities that were involved in this project are not doing, is that we have gone back. We don't have funding, we have gone back to the communities to provide them training on how to purify the water. The flood waters now, the flood water they have now will now become an opportunity for them in disguise, because they cannot take the water and purify it using Moringa sand filter system. That's wonderful. Then they complain about their seeds and their seed banks all lost. So we are now bringing in a phytobiotech approach where you can do grafting and marcoting, as well as tissue cultures to be able to regenerate some of the seeds that they have. That's something discussion for another day. That's our interventions that we're bringing in. And now the next one that we're also doing is to train them on how to, run plastic biodigester to generate fertilizers, which is very cheap. So we run a training yesterday. They had a session with Anam community, which is one of our case study communities on this. And it went really, 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 really well. And right now, they are now mobilizing. So we have 3 trainings lined up for them. Water treatment, which we started yesterday. The biofertilizer, which would provide fertilizer for them. It's a do-it-yourself. And then they can have maybe biogas for 3 hours cooking. But if it doesn't have, there's no problem, but they are going to have the fertilizer. And then to regenerate their seeds that are lost, through tissue culture, which we have the technology, and grafting techniques that we already have. And then last but not the least, on the line, is to help them to plant trees that prevent erosion. We have typha. We also have vetiver plants, which are plants that we've identified that they can use that to regenerate the soil and cushion the effect of flooding. So to end this session, before we entertain questions, take home message: community is medicine. We have to really, and the world is a community. Our earth is a community. The soil is a community. So we look at community of microbes and all that. And this is a take home. We need to increase research to build on co-creation and co-delivery. We have to involve everyone on board. We need to increase community resilience. Communities are already resilient, but we have to increase the resilience, and then that way to increase their mental health resilience as well. And there's something I'm doing a training on climate and health literacy advancement. Climate has a literacy that we need to know. And health literacy for mental and psychological is very key and important for us. Some references are there. And I'd like to thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, and I will entertain general questions for us to end this session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. I don't know, can we give him a round of applause with our reactions on the chat box? It has been a huge learning curve, even for me. Like you said earlier, we are all learning, and even though you think you know, we still keep knowing, and this is what this session has emulated for me today. I'm really grateful, and I'm sure other people who have been listening to these sessions have gotten lots of knowledge, and they've gained a lot. Yeah, so open for questions. If you have any questions for Professor Kenneth, you can raise your hand. So you can unmute, or you can also drop your comments in the chat box. Please don't be shy. You can just go ahead. So we have somebody. David, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Morning, sir. Thank you very much for the beautiful presentation. So I'm particularly interested on this water purification using moringa. Is it something that industries can adopt and use in place of the chemicals? I just finished consuming the water you talked about, and I've not really somehow. So I'm wondering if there is a more way we can advance this use of moringa, and if other means also to replace the chemicals. Thank you very much. And if also it's something that we can take to the grassroots and also begin to implement even at family levels, and practical ways we can begin to, because I want to take actions from here. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much for your question, sir. Charity begins at home. My village, the secondary school, is already using, that's about 350 students, using the moringa water filter system for 9 years now, unbroken. That's a very important message I want to give to you. If we at all want to do a training subsequently after this, I will show you the community water plant, the government provided water plant, and then the moringa water plant. For 9 years is the moringa water plant that is sustainable and working. You see the pictures, they're all on the same area. I went there and I said, that's what we need to do. And that's a community where I used to go and fetch water when I was in primary school and secondary school. Did you grow up in a scenario where you have to leave early in the morning to go and fetch water, clean the house before you come and eat and go to school? That's the way we grew up. We never had taps inside the house. So I used to go there like 2 kilometers to fetch water in a calabash and bring back home. So having been a professor, and I decided that I'm going to now go back there and set up a sustainable water system. And I went and put the water there. And as I speak, 2012 to 2024, how many years? 12 years. Functional, and it's there. It's a moringa. That's the first ecological water treatment system in Africa. I've checked. Didn't see anyone. I've checked. So when you hear people shout about this climate justice, there's hunger also in the shouts, and we need to take action. That's the fact. You see, and I challenge Solstice Vibes, which is a wonderful organization, anchoring there, and I challenge the Public Health Network. I'm answering your question in a broader context, because you say we need to take action. You do not say I need to take action. I'm answering your question idem per idem. You said we need to take action. You did not say I need to take action. How do we take action? I'm giving you the hint. Went to my community, I've set up. So what I'm telling you here is what is functional. Even as I sit here, I have a water filter over there. I've set up one over here where I'm seated. And so, yes, it was one of the projects flagged by the African Union to be implemented in 54 countries. This project was voted, and I had to patent the technology. So I have a patent right for this technology. It's a climate technology. And for the person asking that question, I've also patented a technology for rural communities who use latrines and toilets. It's widespread. 60–70% of Nigerians, they don't have toilets. Okay? They don't have toilets. And the toilets get filled. Some of them go to the bushes. And they use carbide, a substance, to take away the odor substance. Go back to your villages, go and find out how they survive. Now we discover a climate resilient technology using 2 different plants that takes away the odor and improve the toilets. And we now ask them to plant that around their latrines. So I'm giving you, this is the way we fight the climate change. This is the way we are fighting climate change. This is the way we are creating resilience. And the people now are happy. You can't go to a toilet that stinks, it's terrible, and then they have a mental health issue. They have emotions. And then when the flood comes, what happens? It sweeps into their toilet and the whole place stinks. Go to these communities and find out. Hey, the students, we're all here. We live in the cities, right? Let's go back to the village, to this flood community, and see real life situation that we're talking about. That's where life begins. It is sad. Even now, as I'm talking, my emotions are already running high because of what I've seen. So we cannot start only talking. Let's go back. Let's build these trainings and have trainers or trainers to go to these communities. People have their money. I don't believe this thing is not just about money. It's about let's do this thing with compassion. There's also compassion in this climate issue. There's also compassion. So go back and write that word compassion. We have to treat these technologies with compassion. So it works. When African Union got to it, I've presented seminars on it. I've shown it. They called me once in African Union Secretariat in Abuja and said, and I came there. I never knew that they had kept some dirty water for me. They bought all the things, but they never told me that that was what I was going to do. And then they asked me, Professor Yongabi, just sit, we just called you. And they gave me a flight ticket to come there in African Union Secretariat. They never told me. They brought all kinds of dirty water and put all the materials that I was claiming in a paper. And then called me in the morning when I came, they said, here is water. Look at the material. Can you treat it? And that's the picture I've shown you there. We treated the water. It came out exactly like water, like Nestle water. How many of you have seen Nestle water? It's the most expensive water now in Nigeria. The one treated, I think it's Nestle, right? Am I right? Nestle water. That's how the water came out to be. And they also brought water I never knew, Jabi Lake. And they went to an unknown laboratory in Abuja. And they took the parameters and tested and got all the results very clear. They only revealed to me afterwards that this is how the results are shown. So that's indirectly answering the question that everybody is asking. So later on, I presented this in Australia, everywhere, and they're all shouting and saying, this is an exciting thing. But then we have prophets of doom who will not take this technology. And then later on now, they were to get money to implement it for 54 countries across Africa. But then politics came in there. That to tell you again that they were now looking at it as an opportunity to wreak the environment. That is also the climate risk we're talking about, where the human factor comes in to create the risk and risk multiplier effect as well. So yes, take it to a level. And I tell you this, I've treated water from all industries, water with detergents. I have the data and statistics. Refinery wastewater, statistics I have here on my table. Water from NASCO, confectionaries and industries, we treated the water using this particular technology. And it comes out and you can drink the water. It meets the EPA standard, the Environmental Protection Agency standard, and it meets the WHO standard. All the minerals, heavy metals are taken away. All the E. coli counts, mere zero. Coliform counts, mere zero. Total aerobic hectotrophic bacteria counts, all within the normal limits for pure water. And the pictures are there. It's another talk for another day. Yes. So let's start drinking the Adam and Eve water, the water that was found in the Garden of Eden. That's it.
Yeah, thank you very much, sir, for your response. I really like what you said on compassion. I think that's one thing that is really missing in all our solutions, where we don't really connect to humans. Like you said, lives begin in the village. Like Lagos State is a city, you have like the best technology as you can have in Africa, in Lagos. But people who are in these rural areas are the one really battling. They are the ones at the front line. They are the ones very, very vulnerable to the climate crisis, the mental impacts that come from there. David also dropped a comment and he said he would appreciate to be trained and to also like implement in his community. And I think that's one thing we are working on at Trusty Vibes, to have this training for young people. Like Professor Kenneth said, train the trainers. We can all keep training each other, and from there it's like a tree that branches out, and before you know it, everybody is able to do this and take care of themselves as much as they can. In community. I'm just going to open the floor for any other questions. If anybody else has any question or any comments at all that you want to share with us, we would really love to hear you.
And
Please
Ayo, may
don't
I
be
come
shy.
in there? Ayo, may I
Yeah,
come in?
yeah.
Let me tell you, the 1.2 billion people now in the world don't have potable water, don't have clean water. 1.2 billion people, and they don't have portable sanitation at the moment. And that statistics, we've been quoting statistics for the last 10 years, and it hasn't changed right now. A country like Australia, milk is cheaper than water. That tells you, because they use so much high technology to treat their water. So water becomes more expensive than milk. A bottle of milk is cheaper than a bottle of water. That's to tell you exactly what it is. Now, I did a study here. Within Edo State and Imo State, Kogi, people have boreholes. Many houses with boreholes and wells, and even water catchment. No one is treating water. So they have the boreholes. They look at the water looking physically clean and sparkly, whatever, but they use it. See the irony there. They have the water, but very few drink the water. They still go and buy pure water. You see the psychological impression there, because it's called pure water and package. You buy it because of the packaging. It is a psyche, but not even worry about how that treatment was done. But the one they have, and many people just go and bottle this water into sachet, which is from the boreholes, and they call it pure water produced by AK and Sons. But you have the same borehole and you have the water. You don't have the confidence, the fear, the psychological trauma to drink that water. That is it. And now, rich people in this country, in Nigeria, if you give them this pure water or water from the borehole, they drink tomorrow, even when there's no typhoid, they will develop typhoid. It's psychological. That's to tell you that. And that is very interesting dynamics playing out here. So Nigerians don't treat water. Most of the boreholes don't treat water. And the major challenge, as much as we know that there is the vulnerable population in the villages, but go to the urban slums in Kenya, in Lagos, in Nigeria, life is difficult. Look at the sanitation there in the urban slums. It's a major problem. Look at the waste disposal patterns in the urban slums. It's a major problem. Water is a major problem in Lagos. Drinking water is a major problem in Lagos. I must confess to you. Lagos, about 23 million people, densely packed in one city. Same like Nairobi. Now, you will discover, if they have a filter drum that uses a Moringa sand filter system, or what they call a phyto, sand filter system in the urban slums, that would play a lot. That you can take any dirty water and you can take it back to drinking. That would play, and it's ecologically friendly, ecologically sound. You begin to imagine, have you ever taken the mental barometer of people living in urban slums in Lagos, in the Ajegule areas, in all these particular areas? They're mentally challenged. They're mental. It's even terrible in the mental area, in this particular area, when you look at the mental geography of these people in those particular areas. Even the villages, they are happier than people living in the urban slums, I must confess. I must confess, the man in the village drinks the water, has become even immune to it. Malaria is a normal thing. Typhoid is a normal thing. But the person in the urban area has a major challenge. So we need to treat this is an imbroglio thing that I'm talking about. We need to address the urban slums. Their mental health is a big problem in that sense. Thank you. So
Yeah,
open to questions.
yeah, thank you very much for that response. I just even want to say, even over here in my house in Lagos, we have a bowl, like you said, but we also still drink pure water because we don't trust we don't trust the groundwater. And we don't want to feel ill. I think Dami also even dropped that in the comments where she said the water coming from the bowl feels metallic and they need to buy water purifiers, chemical purifiers. So I think it's a very ubiquitous problem for us in Lagos. I can personally attest to experiencing that too. And yes, it just brought up new thoughts around me on what I can do. So yes, this training is very important for us to know how to do these things by ourselves as young people. And I'm sure if I have a water purifier in my house, my neighbors will also want to get it. And that is how we spread this kind of interventions and innovations around other people. So Damilola asks if lithium is being added to bottled water. I don't know if this is in the scope of
I've seen the question,
responses.
Ayo.
Yeah.
Ayo, see, this is the doctrine we want to preach. We go to these conferences. Ayo, you were with me in Caribbean when we went there in Caribbean. I was watching the temperature. There are things that cannot work. There are things that work, but we have to be there. If students like this sit here and we don't address toilets ecologically in Africa, I'm glad you used the word public health, African public health students, Africa. If we are not the ambassadors to make this change, forget about it. We'll keep talking. I hate talking. I'm more or less into action. Okay? I hate talking. I like this action. Okay. The chemicals we're using to purify water, lithium. Hear the name lithium. These are chemicals, and these are precursors for cancer. Go back and Google, all of us here, Google chlorine. Chlorine is what is chlorine? Is an element of the periodic table, group 7 element of the periodic table. Chlorine, bromine, iodine. They form what they call carcinogens. They form carcinogens. These are carcinogenic compounds in water. That's what we're using to purify our water today. Can you imagine? They are that group 7 elements. And then we have compounds that we are using that are in the transition elements of the periodic table, where they have an empty D shell. And we call them the prostitutes, the elemental prostitutes that are in the periodic table, because whatever they receive, these are the compounds that we're using partly also to purify wastewater. And they're the compounds we're using as what? Pesticides and fertilizer. So whatever they are, they attract it. And that's what they end up in our vegetables. And we eat. Look at vegetables that we eat today. Recently, our products on the World Trade Organization market, World Trade Organization said that products coming from Africa are on the market. They are so packed with pesticide residues and organochlorines and organophosphate residues. Go to Lagos. Take the drain water, especially around the creek areas. You will see so much water hyacinth proliferating and aquatic cabbages proliferating. That tells you that is a simulation of the anthropogenic activity of the people of Lagos. Have you done that? So we have to treat this thing with intellect. Just go to Lagos, the creek areas, you see a lot of proliferation of water hyacinth, Econia crassipes, and aquatic cabbages, water lilies proliferating everywhere in the streams. And look at the color of the streams, brown. That is a corroboration of the anthropology of the people. There's something I was giving a seminar at the Imo State University, and I said, by your waste bin, I will know your lifestyle. And I call the study garbology. Garbology. Garbageology, study of garbage. So by your waste bin, I will know you. By the fruits, will know you. Bible says, by the fruits, will know them. Now, if you take the waste bin of a rich man, just take the refuse dump of a rich man's house, you can begin to simulate certain cancerous diseases. Immediately, you can simulate it. Now, go and take the waste bin of someone in the village, cocoyam peels, yam peels, banana peels, oha peels, ofore pepper. You see, this is the kind of thing you see in their garbage. You can simulate their life pattern. So what I'm trying to say is that we need these chemicals that we're treating water. If we start reducing them, we are also improving the climate. We're also creating climate resilience by reducing these chemicals. We are preaching, but if I bring water treated by Moringa and I show you the chemistry, we show you the safety, the efficacy, the reliability, you will still be looking at this bottled water treated using UV light, which increases heat, which depletes ozone layer. You will not go for this very water. So how do we talk about climate justice when you cannot legislate that the Moringa sound filter technology that we're talking about is a green technology, it is cheap, it is effective. Look at the science of valorization. Look at the science of validity. It is there. But you want to go to America and buy water treated using reverse osmosis. That kills the ozone layer. That adds global warming. These are the things we're talking about. But if you people and us decide that we're putting a sun filter tomorrow, Solstice Vibe has implemented 1,000 sun filter or bio sun filters in Lagos in order to fight climate change. That is an impact. That's what you should be talking to people. And then you go back and find out, how are you coping? Are you happy with that sun filter? And then you can take any water and treat. That is a proportional impact on fighting climate change and mental health and improving health care. There's no way. And if we now go back and say, it's not just beyond picking papers on the street, no, because people have a culture of what? Disposal. They have a very poor culture of disposal in Africa. It's a mental, it's an attitudinal problem. So we can start from here. Take these technologies at the same time and say, we want to take away lithium from our water. We want to take away chlorine from our water. Here are the names of this compound. Just Google them and read through and see. We want to take away aluminium sulfate. Aluminium is what we use in water as a coagulant, and it produces acidity of about 6.5 or thereabout in water. Cannot be used by pregnant women to treat water. They need to buy lime. And these countries in Africa, what do? They buy and they import chlorine. And in Nigeria, just take Benue State, for example. Every compound within Benue State in Otupo that I found has a moringa tree. One moringa tree has about 13 pods. One pod has about 12 seeds. 13 times 12 seeds. And one seed treats about 1 liter of water. And it's green. And you can produce moringa fertilizer. You can produce moringa water. You can produce green fertilizer from moringa. And that kind of a thing. And then at the same time, moringa is food. And we do that to improve the mental health of the people, and especially in disaster-prone areas and vulnerable communities. We preach a message of this greening technology, which is cheap and environmentally available. There's a technology proof for it in any sense, not just like picking any technology. Then we can begin to reduce lithium. We're not saying we're going to eliminate completely at this moment now, but when we're talking about this, how much reduction have we created in 1 year? These are practicalities. So thank you. Questions and discussions?
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. You keep dropping knowledge, and it's just a lot. I just even realized we have a moringa tree at home, and I have not been utilizing it. For now, this is something that, yeah, to always think through. Due to the time, I'm just going to leave 2 minutes for any other questions or comments. But if you have questions, that pop up after this session, you can always email us at @socialvibes.org. I have dropped that in the chat. You can also reach us on all social media channels at teap.africa. So that's TEAP.Africa. And you can send us your questions. We can always reach out to Professor Kenneth, and he is very open to responding to young people and guiding us in directions that we should go. So we would love to have any additional comments or chats, so you can send them via email, or you can also reach out to us via social media. Yeah. So like, due to the time, I will just round off now. I just want to thank you all. First of all, thank Professor Kenneth for taking the time to speak to us and for sharing this knowledge with us. This session has been very impactful. The recording from this session will be uploaded on YouTube, and we'll have links on our social media. So like I said, just follow us on social media and you will stay updated on the next steps after this session, trainings and any other thing we'll have. Follow us on social media, and then you can also get connected on that. And I'm also grateful to you participants for joining and taking your time to relax and listen to what we've had to say through this session. Thank you for just being here, and thank you for the people who commented. Thank you for the people who asked questions. We are really grateful for the thoughts that goes behind all of this that you've asked. So for me, one thing I'm taking away from this session is compassion and community, which I think we need to keep emphasizing. We've emphasized this all through, the summit, and this is something that even Professor Kenneth highlighted again. As young people, we need to come together, ignoring race, gender, wherever you're coming from, tribe, and come together for climate resilient solution. Like Professor Kenneth said, you cannot just mental health is not separate from climate resilience or from technology and innovations. Everything is interconnected: your biology, your psychology, your environment, your finances. Like it said, how would you have climate justice when people are hungry? How will you have climate justice when people don't have clean water to drink? So these are all the things that have been highlighted for us, and I would also encourage us to go back and reflect and ruminate on all these discussions. Like I said, the video is going to be back on YouTube. It's something I'm also going to watch again, to also get more knowledge, because Professor Kenneth has shared a lot with us. So yeah, thank you all. I'm very, very grateful for you joining us today. I don't know if anyone have last words they want to share before we close the room. There is a general session by 11 a.m. I'm sure we all have the link to that. So we'd like for you to also connect to the general session, which is going to be speaking on planetary health. After this. So if there are any last words or comments, you can also drop your reactions in the chat box. I would really love to see your reactions or what you think about this session. You can also share via email or via social media. We would really, really love to hear from you. And yeah, we are extremely grateful for you taking the time to be here from the beginning of the session till right now. And also super grateful to Professor Kenneth for the way he has always supported young people, especially us at Society Vibes, and him also taking the time to share this knowledge with us. We are very, very grateful. So thank you all for joining. Yeah.
Ayo, sorry. Is it possible that you take a group, people can put their cameras, you take a picture and send for us to promote it to this summit?
Oh, okay, great. Okay, that's perfect. So if you can
take a picture and write the caption.
Camera.
Yeah, so everybody can put their camera. So we just have a sense of a picture for everyone. So you send it with a caption so we can put it on our X handle. Yeah.
All right, thank
and
you.
For those who want to take the training, get in touch with Society Vibe or write to me if you have some other issues. We have to liaise with Society Vibes to really encourage this initiative they are doing. And also the fact that for those who want to take postgraduate studies and all this thing, please, you are free. For those who want to take training and capacity building and become ambassadors, please let us work with compassion. So let's take the picture.
Thank you so much, sir. Yes, so if you can turn on your video, I can see Royalty has done that. Ola Deckwell, thank you. So if you can turn on your video for just a few seconds, maybe, and we can take a photo. We'll just give you like 3 seconds on their videos.
Sorry, Ayo, some are not hearing what you are saying because they are muted.
Oh.
Some are muted. Please, can you put on your camera so we take a group picture so that Ayo can send it over. Let me push it for social media. Ayo, not everybody. maybe a message on the chat group,
Yeah,
chat
we'll do that
box.
now. I've taken one photo, but we'll also still want more pictures.
Yeah, can you put on your cameras, please? Okay. But so many haven't put on it. Okay, great. I'm able to see people now.
Yeah.
So it's such a pleasure. Yes. But some perhaps are not. Put on your
Yeah,
cameras. All right.
okay, so I am going to take a picture now. If you want to smile or whatever, you can just do that
I
now.
think the smile is good. Yeah.
Okay, okay. 1, 2, go. Perfect. Perfect.
Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you all so much for joining the session. We are really grateful. Thank you so much, sir. I will send you the pictures and all other comments via email. Thank you.
Thank
Don't
you so
forget to
much.
follow us on Tip Africa or email us at tip@sostivibes.org for any of your questions or requests, or if you also want to connect with Professor Kenneth, you can also get his LinkedIn at Kenneth Yongabi Achang. So I think you can follow him on LinkedIn.
Okay, let me just put the email there also, just in case you have some questions. There's one email there. Okay. So you can see my email there. And I think there are some questions. So someone asked a question on doing a project or so. So you can ask the details on that. Then we can, on antimicrobial resistance, so we can tackle that. I appreciate you. Thanks.
All right. Thank you all so much.
Thank
We're
you
going
so
to be
much.
closing the room
Thank
now.
you.
Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you so much.
Bye. Take care. And thank you. Thank you, staff.
Bye.
And thank you, everyone, for joining. Super grateful.
Thank you.
Bye. Lovely. Thank you, sir.